everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show for March 4th, 2020. I'm so tired. I'm James Davenport, but also so tired. I was in Boston all weekend. Apologies for no show last week. Scheduling snafus, and had a lot going on. But we have, like 4 hours of interviews about some pretty cool games on the website, and I will be appending an audio version of one of them to this episode. But a lot happened besides PAX last week. Wes Fenlon, who's here with me today.
Hello, tired James.
Yes, this is my final form. You saw, and this the irony of these events, right? Is like they revealed, Larian revealed Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay at PAX East, like literally like a room away from probably where I was at the time.
On a big stage.
Yada, yada, yada. And I just didn't know anything about it the entire weekend. It was totally just, right? You think being on the ground, I would just kind of soak it in through pure osmosis, but it wasn't until I sat 6 hours on an airplane and got home that I was finally able to take a look at everything going on.
And meanwhile, I had played it a week before, or sorry, I didn't play it. I watched like a 2-hour presentation of it a week before PAX and had been spending all week preparing different coverage based on interviews and based on what we saw in the demo, and spent a lot of time talking with Fraser over in the UK about what we had seen between our two demos, because they were actually quite it was the same demo, but it played out really differently. And that also went for the PAX demo as well, which was the same chunk of the game, playing as the same like lead character, but how the combat turned out and stuff like that was actually quite different between each run, which is really cool.
Bodes well for that kind of game. So we're gonna kind of have a free flowing conversation about Baldur's Gate 3, the stuff we know and that we learned, that you saw, and maybe some concerns or controversial topics such as turn-based versus real-time pause,
such as the obvious superiority of turn-based combat.
Obviously.
I don't understand how that's a controversy. Who likes real-time pause? Apparently like 48% of PC gamers or something, based on our poll.
And the sample size was pretty huge. Like it hit like 20,000 plus answers on our Twitter poll. So it's kind of like I don't know, when you step out into the world, or especially across America, you step out there and you suddenly see people who just disagree with your politics, and you're like, where are you? On Twitter.
Real time with pause really needs to drop out of the race already.
It's done.
So that
It's done.
has a strong foundation.
Here we are.
Going into the general. Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about Baldur's Gate 3 and Halo. Remember that one? That little ditty.
Halo Combat Evolved. Or if you're a longtime PC gamer, Halo Custom Edition is the one that you really care about.
It surprise dropped yesterday on the computer as part of the Master Chief Collection. So now we have Reach and Halo, the original Halo, which is exciting as hell. I'm so too busy, but I'm like really, really pining to get in there and play some multiplayer. So hit me up, Wes.
Yeah. Let's do some campaign co-op over the weekend, perhaps.
Hell yeah. I'm not looking forward to the library, but the rest of it for sure. And just like Baldur's Gate, you were chatting with these folks.
Yeah, I actually went to the Halo studio a few weeks ago and didn't know exactly when it was going to be coming out, but got to see I got to play what people were about to play in one of their flighting rounds, which is like their version of beta testing, basically, where they let people play, a few campaign levels, a few multiplayer maps, and just like test for crashes and performance, that kind of thing. So where should we start? Actually, I feel like before Baldur's Gate, is there any cool stuff you want to talk about from PAX, such as birds with guns?
I wanted to.
There's this skateboarding game that looks really sick. Like I want to hear about this stuff.
Well, I didn't get to play Skate Story. Well, but I'll just briefly mention it because I walked by many, many times between appointments and ended up just like not having time to go back and visit it. But Skate Story is this really surreal. I'm surprised this didn't happen earlier, really, but it uses the language and control scheme and like visual vocabulary of a skateboarding game in a different context. So you've got these really surreal geometrical landscapes and environments.
And you're in the underworld,
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
I think that's the setting.
Yeah, and so you're doing the Tony Hawk skate-ish session-ish things and like ollieing around and kick flipping, and you've got a whole trick system, but it's a narrative construct, and I can imagine like it's kind of exciting to me to think about because these games are traditionally more like open-ended trick-based systemic
like
games.
Go into this environment and just skate around, and maybe there's like a guy who says, collect my videotapes or something.
And this one, like the context has changed. What happens if you design a more like linear narrative experience with these same control concepts? And that's a really cool idea to me, and I think especially appealing to like there's a whole generation of people like myself who grew up on these games, have a strong nostalgia for them, a fondness for them, and like people in skate culture in general, and to see, the something we're so familiar with applied to a different format. I don't know. It's just it's fucking awesome. And it's pretty early in development, I think, but just go to Skates on Twitter, find Skate Story at Skate Story, I'm pretty sure, and just look at some of the GIFs and videos, and the concept is like immediately clear and cool, and you'll know if you're into it or not. So that's like a pretty big highlight. Another one for me is the Falconeer. This is a fascinating game. It's imagine if TIE Fighter, an RPG, and a whole bunch of birds had a baby, and you have the Falconeer.
Continue. Yeah.
These are birds with guns. You pilot a giant hawk in this ocean drowned world, fantasy world. There are these huge open levels. I'm not sure if it wasn't clear if it was like going to be contiguous open world, and I wish I clarified that during my 20-minute interview. But hey, regardless, big open world. Almost, I almost get from the map UI and the overall vibe, like Sunless Seas, Sunless Skies vibes from the kind of world building, like disparate, or like Wind Waker, disparate like islands and in this giant ocean. And I mean, obviously there's dogfighting, so your bird has a gun. You're combating with all these different factions who have these different backstories. There are like weirder, more naturalistic alien concepts like dragons. There are these horseshoe crab boats, like freighters almost. Eels that fly.
This sounds eclectic as hell.
Yeah, and I mean, we have like I said, from PAX, we have this 20-minute preview with the solo developer of this, one of the prettiest games I've seen, or I saw on the show floor and have seen like in recent memory. Beautifully animated, lighting and color, and just the art direction overall, and the creature concepts are so fascinating. One guy made this and is making this.
Wow.
Tomas Sala. And I found out about this after the fact. He also made like a legendary Skyrim mod before this called Return. I think it's Return to Elsewhere.
Moonpath.
Moonpath to Elsewhere. Excuse me. Elsewhere. I don't know how you say that. Forgive me, Skyrim fans. But this is like a kind of an old timey legendary Skyrim mod, and kind of where he had previous game development experience, like 10 or so years beforehand, but that kind of put him on the map, and now he's making his own fantasy universe. Yeah, there are RPG systems in this, so between story missions and quiet bouts of exploration, you'll be kind of upgrading your bird, or I guess like you're tinkering with your stats, and yeah, I don't know, getting into these massive dogfights. He cited TIE Fighter and the X-Wing series, which really like spoke to me specifically. He's like, yeah, people mention a lot of what's the Dragoon game? I'm forgetting the name of it.
Panzer Dragoon.
Panzer Dragoon. Jesus.
Which is I'm a huge Panzer Dragoon fan.
Yeah.
But this looks pretty different.
Yeah, this is more like open-ended, like big time systemic chaotic space battles. He mentioned like we talked about the feeling of like kind of coasting by a giant skyscraper. Scale is a huge part of this. Multiple factions going at it, seeing lasers kind of like clearly cutting across the dramatic skies, and I don't know, it harkens back to that series in particular, which I don't feel like has been, and Red Baron he mentioned as well, which also spoke to me directly. Like I don't feel like I've had an aerial flight game that's really that felt cut from the same cloth. And I'm sold on the universe, sold on the art, sold on everything else. It's supposed to come out this year. Yeah, we've got like, again, 25-minute interview and gameplay demo on the site. I
really like it too, because so many games that if they're trying to be the next TIE Fighter or be the next, space sim, flight sim, whatever, like they tend to just completely ape the setting and tone of whatever that thing is, rather than trying to do something new and really different, but that conjures up the same feelings that those games did at the time. Like there's so many Kickstarter games where that had that exact problem, right? Of they said, people just want to play this thing from 20 years ago. Well, let's make a new one exactly like that. And then it's like, oh, actually, we kind of just wanted the new version of that old thing that we really liked, not just the old version with different, slightly different coat of paint on it.
Yeah, exactly. And this feels wholly unique in that regard, familiar and completely new at once. So excited for that. Quickly became one of my most anticipated games. Gosh, what else? I'll just list out a couple quick ones. Fall Guys. This is Devolver's publishing this one. I'm forgetting the developer right now, but it's Battle Royale. Stick with me. But made in the vein of goofy game shows like Wipeout and MXC. Is that what it was called? Where it's all about just physics and fucking up. You start with like 60 little like cartoonish characters, and you work through multiple game types. You can jump, you can dive, and you can grab onto things, and those are your verbs.
This really sounds like if Gang Beasts was a battle royale, which I'm pretty into.
It is exactly that. It is less like the controls are less intricate by necessity. But there's a lot of dumb physics going on, and the bright colors and all that vibe is definitely, there's some crossover there. And so I don't know, just like the demo I played, started with 60 people. The first match, and these game types will grow and change and will vary between matches. They plan to add more and more and more, as many as they can put out that makes sense and are fun. Started by like running down this 60 little physics guys, cartoon guys. You start at the starting line. We start sprinting down this narrow corridor. There are a bunch of doors in front of us. Only one of them will collapse. So everyone's like jumping at the wall, trying to, there's a little. It's not like fair necessarily, but that's not the point.
Right.
All the time.
Okay, so it's actually what if Mario Party was a battle royale?
It is. It's Mario Party plus Gang Beasts. Had a 60-player battle royale baby, and so that was one game. Another one, like they might split you into teams after eliminating like the bottom, I don't know, 10 or 12 players from that previous event. There's one where like all these eggs, hungry hippo style, start in the center of this like big bowl arena, and three or four teams like are sprinting to each grab eggs and put them into their base, their goal, this little pit assigned to their color. And at first there's a timer running down as well. At first everyone is grabbing these eggs and just like running, putting them in their base, like and it's trying to be as efficient as possible. But then you start running out of eggs, and you begin to fuck with people. You start grabbing them, you start stealing eggs from their arms. And there were people who just out of spite, like I would steal eggs from them. They would just chase me and like grab me and like try and hold me down just because they were so mad. I could just tell they were so mad. That's a mini game. Gosh, there's another one with like the walls kind of coming at you with tiny passages. Uh, uh, to that you need to sprint to, otherwise you'll get knocked off the arena. There's all sorts of dumb things. There's one like where you have to tag, essentially, where you have to steal each other's tails and you have to get to the end of the round with a tail. Another one, like the final one, is like you sprint up this mountain with boulders coming down and hammers are swinging around.
This sounds really fun, actually.
It's really, really fun, and it's just so accessible and simple, that I think it could be like a medium-sized hit, have a nice little player base, and be especially like good like Discord game with your friends.
Yeah.
Joining a giant lobby, because it's fun to watch too.
It reminds me of one of my favorite arcade games called Panic Park. It's like a Namco game from probably like around the year 2000 or so that is at this event called California Extreme every year. That's a big arcade pinball event. Somebody always brings a machine. And the entire control mechanism for the game is two metal handles that each player, there's a 2-player game, each player gets a metal handle, and you can just swing it left and right into each other's handle or off to the side. And so all of the games are like WarioWare style little mini games where you're like, there are coins falling out of the sky and you're trying to just position yourself underneath them to catch the coins, or you're running down a hallway with, tiny little narrow boards you have to run over. And so the whole game is like trying to control your character while also shoving into the person next to you to try to make them fall off the ledge or miss or whatever. So it's just like, it's kind of a game of strength, but you get those classic moments where you push really hard and then you let go and the other person like falls sideways and loses control. And it's just like very goofy little mini games that are a lot of fun to kind of troll each other with. So I'm all on board for Fall Guys.
Yes, Fall Guys, and there should be like a beta or with a planned release later this year, I'm told. So
it's like a pretty good PAX, huh?
Yeah, and there's plenty more. I'll be putting a video out with a bunch of George and our favorite stuff from the show, and some of the remaining interviews we had. Hard Space Shipbreaker, we already have coverage on the side of that, but fascinating, beautiful game.
Carving up derelict spaceships for parts.
Yeah, so into it. Industries of Titan from Brace Yourself Games, like a dystopic nightmare capitalist future.
It's like a city builder, right?
Yeah, that's a city builder based on pure efficiency. Excuse me, froggy. But imagine like Factorio and a city builder had a baby, and you can literally like enter your buildings, each floor of them, and Factorio style, on a grid, depending what the building is, like move different stations and like grid lines and power providers, and like if it's a manufacturing station, like move around the belts to make winding snake-like exploitative efficiencies, and it's bonkers. So a bit of a different thing from Crypto the Necrodancer, but looking forward to that. Anyway, so many things I could talk about, but let's get to Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of stuff we have on the site about it you can read about if you kind of want to just read through what the entire demo we saw was like. We've got a couple interviews with them about keeping I did one about like how they keep the weirdness in their games with Dungeons and Dragons, because obviously Dungeons and Dragons is like this massive fantasy setting with 40 years of history, something like that. So there's a lot of options there to pull from, but going with Mind Flayers as like the main antagonists of this game is a pretty cool pick, I think. I mean, who knows, maybe they're not even the main antagonists, but they're the ones that are being set up so far as kind of the
it's interesting because they're usually Mind Flayers are usually like the end gamey super mysterious enemy in psychological Lovecraftian nightmare things that kind of live in the edges of these adventures, and now it's from step one. We're getting starting
totally.
there.
They're not just like you find one isolated mind flayer somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
like they
Mm-hmm.
are this large force that you're dealing with in some way. Yeah, so from the demo I saw, I got to see about probably 2 hours or so Baldur's Gate 3.
Cool.
The PAX stream, which I think is the only video of the game that's out there, covered the same ground. I actually got to see a bit more, because Sven, the founder of Larian, who was playing the demo, he actually did a little bit better in the press preview that I saw, and had some more time. So he never party wiped when he played for us, but he did have a wipe, or maybe even two in the PAX demo. I think just one. But so he was able to get a bit further, and we saw a bigger kind of battle towards the end. But there's so much in that game. It really feels a lot like Divinity 2 in the ways that matter, in terms
Hmm.
of the scope of the game, the the variance you're going to have based on the decisions you make, but
Yeah.
also just like your character's background, and the way you play, your personality. Like those things will really affect just how the story plays out. Like you can just choose to kill somebody, and there goes that quest chain,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the demo, he was talking about, like, there's this fight outside a little fortress, and there's some characters you meet, and he's like, yeah, if this one guy dies, there's like a bunch of quests that he'll give you that are just going to be gone, if you don't help him in combat, or if he just gets unlucky, which is which is something that can happen, and you can choose, do you want to be a save scummer and reload and do that fight again, or just roll with it and say that's what happened. So it's a big computer RPG. It's turn-based rather than real time with pause, but I feel like all of the major systems feel distinct from Divinity Original Sin 2. Like
Hmm.
they're similar. It is still a turn-based RPG, but like in Divinity, you had a set number of action points that governed what you could do in your turn, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was taking a move, whether it was like using a really powerful ability, whether it was using a couple smaller abilities. And this game, even though it's turn-based, it doesn't have that system, right? It
Right.
has the D&D system of, you have like a move action, and then you have like an attack ability kind of action. It now has dice rolls in combat that make things play out like statistically different than they would in Original Sin 2, where you didn't have a literal die roll behind the scenes. It was just like percentages were calculated
Mm-hmm.
1 to 100, like, based on your accuracy, whatever, would just be on a 1 to 100 scale. And so the combat actually feels, at least as an observer, like pretty different, because you're seeing uh, you're seeing the die roll kind of happen, and like what the end result of it is in
Yeah.
in a fight.
Does that actually? I mean, like, I wonder, like, in the back end, if that actually changes that
They
much.
so they did tell me that they like had to rework to add the die roll stuff in. They did have to rework like how all that stuff plays
Gotcha.
out. Um, you know how much it changes the probability of, in Divinity, like your character's an archer, and it tells you have a 67% chance to land a hit.
Mm-hmm.
In Baldur's Gate 3, it tells you have a 67% chance to land a hit. I don't really know how different those two things ultimately are, but the systems that produce that number are different.
Well,
Like the way your stats translate into what happens
yes,
are
and
different in this game.
even just on a more basic level, the feeling of a dice roll, I think, in landing a literal dice, because it's represented on screen in these bigger moves, it's just more exciting. It's got that tabletop vibe of clinching it, like, just nailing a move or completely fucking it.
Exactly, yeah. So like in this game, in Baldur's Gate 3, it doesn't show you the die happening for like every
Mhm.
attack stuff you make. But when you land a crit,
Yes.
it'll show like a gold crit 20 appear on the screen, and like it'll get like slashed through. So you do
Yes.
really get that feeling of like, oh, like I got a crit. And then the part that I really like is outside of combat. The thing you're talking about
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it has these active dice rolls for most of the major decisions you have to make in like in narrative moments. Like if you're saying, okay, I'm going to try to bluff this person, or I'm going to try to intimidate them or whatever, it pops up a die and you have to grab your mouse and just like, kind of swing the die, and it will roll and show you, okay, you needed to hit an 8 to pass this skill check,
Right.
and it'll roll the die and then show you, oh, you made a 7, you failed it, or it'll tell you like, oh, you made a critical fail. That can be different. So it does that for like a lot of story beat stuff, and then the same thing for pickpocketing enemies. When you go to like reach into somebody's pocket, it'll make you roll a die to see, how stealthy you are. So there's definitely a lot of stuff in there that feels like they have adapted Dungeons and Dragons rather than just they're making the same kind of RPG they made before and like slapped the name on it. Like
Right.
the fundamentals are definitely in there.
Also in combat, the way this stood out to me, the way turns play out is or at least, excuse me, the way you play out your turn between characters varies a bit, right? So rather you can kind of put out all your moves at once. You can bounce between characters and decide what they're going to do at once rather than. Well, can you explain exactly what that's going on
Yeah.
there?
So if you think about the way it worked in the last two Divinity
Yeah.
games, the original Sin games, they would show at the top of the screen like a turn order
Yeah.
chart,
Yeah.
and that would be based on like how fast your characters were and all that stuff. And so you might be able to move your thief character, like could go first because they're really speedy, had like high initiative and stuff. But then there might be like 3 enemies taking their turns before your next party member got a turn, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. In this game, it's like it's the computer's turn and then it's your turn.
Yes.
And on your turn, however many people you have in your party, and say you got 3 people in your party, you can choose which order you want to do all of their moves in. So like you could move one character out of the way of another character then being able to shoot, a fireball at somebody that would have hit your character, but you can move out of the way first, then switch over to your wizard and like throw that fireball, then switch back to the character that you moved and use them to, take their action, throw an item at somebody. You can throw like your equipment out of your inventory, which is something they haven't like balanced the damage for yet, but you can like the example Fraser loved from his demo is you can just like take your boot off and throw it at somebody and do like 2 damage to them. So yeah, you can choose what order you move your characters in, which means on a given turn, you're going to have to spend a lot more time thinking about the order you should move these characters in and what you
Mm-hmm.
should be doing on your turn, which I think is pretty cool. And I'm really excited about that for multiplayer, because when you're playing Divinity Original Sin 2 with like 3 or 4 people, you're spending a lot of time waiting for your turn, especially if somebody
Yeah.
else in your party, the really fun way to engage with these games is to think really tactically about what you're doing with your character. But that could mean that you're sitting there on your turn, spending 5 minutes going like, okay, here are all my abilities. What's the best one I should use in this situation? If I do this, what can my friend do on their turn? So that can just take a really long time. And this game, you can still probably spend that much time talking to each other and figuring out what your moves are going to be. But there's also the option of you all just doing shit at the same time and then having to dig yourself out of the hole you created.
Well, and it also sounds like that'll allow for more intentional team play as opposed to like reactive team play.
Totally. Less
kind of
forced team play, more like if you want to talk about this, you have to really talk about it before anybody does anything.
Right on. That's so rad.
And so I hopefully that will make it a bit.
Yeah.
Even if you're spending time talking, hopefully it'll make it a little faster to play these games multiplayer. I spent like 90 hours playing Original Sin 2 as campaign with a couple other people, and that was a blast. Like no regrets about doing that, but it did take us like 3 months to get through the whole game.
It's a long time. Cool. So what else is going on in Baldur's Gate 3? Have we talked about the premise, the story premise at all? I mean, we mentioned that mind flayers are a thing, but at the beginning of this, there's something inherent to your character that it's pretty nasty. It's pretty
Yeah, so
gross.
your character, I don't remember if they've really said too much about why your character is in this position. I think there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of narrative there that they're just not giving all of it away at this point. But your character, you've been like captured by the mind flayers, and they put a mind flayer like tadpole in your eyeball,
It's the
which
worst. I mean, it's the worst looking.
is
Like they have a
pretty gross.
cinematic showing it off, and it's awful. It's awful. But anyway.
And basically, what that's going to do is like burrow into your brain and eventually turn you into a mind flayer, supposedly.
Yeah.
And that's apparently a very painful experience. But in the short term in the game, sort of the thing that's like pushing you forward on your quest is trying to get this thing out of your head before
Mm-hmm.
your brains are scrambled. And the tadpole, because mind flayers have all these like psychic abilities, it gives you the ability to like telepathically talk to other people who were also captured by the mind flayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like in Divinity, you were like the god chosen, I think was what they called them, and that was kind of the what bound your party together, and what kind of was the excuse for the video gamey framework
Yeah.
of why are we going on this quest, and like why can we see what the other person is talking about with an NPC, and just
Mm-hmm.
that those
Mm-hmm.
kind of gamey things. So in this game, like your characters can telepathically talk to each other because they have this weird psychic connection from the tadpoles in their brains, and I assume that will continue throughout the game, even if you get this thing taken out and don't turn into a mind flayer.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of my guess of how it's going to play out. But that's sort of all I know about the beginning of the story. Is you have a couple hours where you're like trying to find a healer who can help you with this thing, and I'm sure your quest will get much more complex from there on.
Yes, definitely. Also, I don't know, like
They have
some
said it's going to go to the city of Baldur's Gate eventually.
yeah.
It's not just called Baldur's Gate for
It's going to Baldur's Gate, but the initial Steam early access release, Steam? Did we say? I'm
yes,
assuming Steam.
Steam early access. Yeah,
Will not feature that bit of the game, as far as I know.
yeah. It doesn't seem like it. They've said that the Steam version, I believe they said it'll probably be the early access release will be like the first 20-ish hours of the game or
It's a lot
something
of
like
game.
that. It's like the first part of Act 1, that kind of thing. So it's gonna be substantial, but definitely not the version of the game to play if you prefer to experience the story in its
Yeah.
entirety, right? Like they did the same thing with Original Sin 2. I believe they released Original Sin 1 in the same way. They put a chunk of the game out. They get a lot of feedback on the writing, on the mechanics, on the performance, and they use that to polish off the rest of the game. So only participate in that if you want to, if you either just can't wait to play Baldur's Gate 3, or if you like being involved in that process of helping the
Yeah.
developers shape the game.
Other minor changes. I know that the camera is going to be down low and showing a lot of kind of BioWare style character perspectives this time in dialogue.
Yeah,
and such.
it feels kind of like a classic like Dragon Age 1
Yeah.
sort of, where you can play from like the top down perspective if you want to. You can play, basically looks like Divinity Original Sin 2. You can zoom way out. Or you can zoom in and kind of get a behind the back of your character. And it's not going to feel quite this like as close up and third person actiony as like Mass Effect, for
Yeah.
example. Even like Mass Effect 1 is more of a zoom in on your character, where this game, like in combat, you're not going to play like that, right?
No.
Because you're going to zoom out, to get a view of the whole map and everything. So they didn't want to bring it in, like The Witcher or something where you're like right behind your character and like this is you and you're immersed in this world, because it's really much more of a classical PC RPG than that. But it feels like a really nice way for them to enhance the storytelling and make your transition from walking around into dialogue scenes feel a lot more like dramatic and
Mm-hmm.
more acted out, because they do have like motion capture now. And when you get into a cutscene, you're actually like zoomed in on your characters' faces talking, very much in that classic, BioWare way. If you've played Knights of the Old Republic, if you've played Jade Empire, if you've played Dragon Age, like you'll know exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it does feel like a much smoother transition from you're out on this big map to like, oh yeah, my camera's kind of right behind my character's back, zoomed out a little bit, and then seamlessly transition into a close up for cutscenes and dialogue.
Neato. I don't. Maybe we should save the topic for real time versus turn based for like its own spin-off podcast. But yeah, that's a thing that has changed as well. And if you didn't glean that already, the original games were real time strategy, real time pause.
Here, I guess one nugget for the real time diehards, real time with pause diehards. This isn't going to appease you when it comes to combat, but it does have a really cool system where, okay, so in Original Sin 2, you could go into like a sneak mode to try to set up like surprises on your enemies, get an advantage in battle. It's also how you would go around like pickpocket, that kind of thing. They have I think a much better system in this game where you can activate turn-based mode at any point on the world map. And when you activate that, you get a like, it gives you, I think it's 6 seconds worth of world state and like character movement that you can do, where basically like time has paused and you get to move your character 6 seconds worth of movement. And then once you've done that, then the world catches up and gets its 6 seconds. And then you get your another movement. So basically you can activate turn-based mode, sneak up behind somebody, take something out of their pocket, retreat around the corner, and then you've used up all your movement points. Then the game gets to go for 6 seconds. So it's basically simulating like you've done this action in this brief period of time that they haven't been able to see, but you're able to do it more precisely than you would if you're trying to kind of clumsily do it in real time. So that's kind of a real time with pause system, I guess you could say, and you'll definitely be using that a lot to get through traps and steal stuff from people and that kind of shit. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, game's looking shiny and neat, and has me. I've never played Baldur's Gate 2 or the original, so I'll have to put aside 200 hours.
They might only be 50 each.
And hammer those out, because this has me excited. I still have to finish Original Sin 2, by the way. I'm like 60 hours in. It's
a big beefy game.
Yeah, these are big games that are best played over long periods of time. Do you think you're gonna hit the early access up? I'm thinking I'm gonna wait.
I think only if I am doing some coverage of it for PC Gamer. I mean, definitely my preferred way to play it would be, all at once. But at the same time, like these games are so systems heavy that if for work I'm going in there and I'm playing that first like 15 hours, I'm just gonna pick a play style and a character who I don't want to play and like experience that whole arc together. I'll just go like, oh yeah, I'll play a style that I don't usually play. Like I'm gonna be, a weird like chaos wizard who is an asshole to everybody he runs into or something, right? And then the next time I play through it, probably with friends, because I really enjoyed doing that in the Divinity games, then I'll play a totally different character and have a very different experience, I'm sure.
Sweet. Anything else to mention? I mean, we buttload of coverage on the site. So if you really want to dig in, go watch that PAX reveal, read our stuff for different angles and kind of takes on how that play session rolled out.
Yeah.
It's pretty
We
entertaining.
don't know when it's coming to early access
Yeah.
yet, other than this year, right? So also don't know when the full release will be, but I think very unlikely that that's this year. I feel like it'll
Hmm.
probably hit early access in the fall and then be in early access for 6 months to a year,
Yeah.
and they'll probably release the full game next spring, next summer, next fall at the latest.
What's the rush? We got Cyberpunk this fall, so we'll have an RPG to sink our teeth into for quite some time.
Yeah, seriously.
Right on. So,
Although I feel like right now I'm more excited for Baldur's Gate 3 than Cyberpunk, but I think
ooh,
I think in my
okay.
head Cyberpunk still does not, like, I don't
Yeah.
acknowledge that it's a real game, that it's like a that it
I'm with
exists
you.
in a, fully formed, that it is a thing that I will just sit down and play. Like, it still feels like this kind of far off, like,
Hmm.
idea ambition for like a massive game, and then it'll come out and just be like, oh yeah, this is a video game, and hopefully it's a really good one. But
I mean, like even Half-Life Alex coming out late, like in like two
couple
weeks,
weeks,
two
yeah,
weeks ish, just over 2 weeks. I and we've seen more gameplay of it just over the last 2 days. I can't compute that
exactly.
that's happening. I even have a headset and I'll be able to play it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, let's talk about Halo. So you went and hung out with these folks and you
Yeah,
saw.
I went up to 343 Industries for a day and mostly talked to them about the the last like year or so of, they announced they were bringing um this Master Chief Collection to the PC,
Mhm.
right? And then they kind of were quiet for a while as they started working on it, and then started talking a lot more about it as they got closer to Reach coming out in December. And now Halo 1 has also come out. So I just wanted to talk to them about the work that has gone into bringing all those games to the PC, and how Reach did, and how they're like, what the issues were with the launch of
Mhm.
Reach, and like the stuff that they're working on, fixing, and what's to come in these next few games. So there's a feature I wrote for the magazine that kind of gives that broad overview. But then I pulled a couple things out for the web that are up, talked to them about fixing crouch, which was kind of a funny problem,
Yeah.
and also like just the process of this was kind of like a broader thing, but they were obviously talking about Halo because they work on Halo, of how you what the problems are that arise when you're taking a game that was like programmed to run at a locked 30 FPS and then port it to PC and go, we're going to make it 60 FPS, or variable frame rate where it can run at 72 FPS or 144, or just anywhere in between. So those were some fun little interview snippets that I pulled out. But yeah, like Halo's, there's a lot of Halo now.
It's back
It's back.
again. Yeah. So Reach was like this really breakthrough moment. Like it was cool. Finally, we had a Halo game that has not been on PC. It's back. It's got great support. Some pretty solid PC options. Not perfect by any means. The multiplayer's there. People are playing it, but it didn't quite feel like the Halo I knew and was really pining for. That DMR drove me a little mad. No
Yeah,
long.
and I think that was represented in the number of players
Yeah.
who kept around. Like, I think it broke 100,000 concurrence on the first day when it
Yeah.
launched, when Reach launched, which is a lot. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
close to, it's not like top 10 biggest games ever on Steam by a long shot, but it's like, it's up there. It's a good launch.
Yeah.
But I think that within a few weeks that was down into only sub 10,000 people playing at any given time, which is still enough people to be able to find a match.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Reach, at least in terms of the multiplayer, is maybe the least, like, generally the least popular of the
Mm-hmm.
whole series. Maybe Halo 4 fits, steals that crown, but like those two games didn't really catch on with people the way the previous ones had. And they were definitely in that weird squeeze of trying to appeal to the loyalists who
Yeah.
every time you put out a new one, it was just like, why isn't this like Halo 1 or like Halo 2 or like Halo 3? Why did you add sprint? Why did you add these armor abilities? So they were trying to not just make literally the same game and, do something new that was going to bring people in, but also appease people who didn't want stuff to change. And I mean, like, to be fair, I was pretty much in that group of people who didn't want things to be changed. I didn't like the armor abilities. I didn't like bloom on the DMR. So there's a lot of stuff in Reach that I didn't love. But you and I like jumped in and played a little bit in that first week, and even though that was not my favorite Halo by a long shot, like we had a lot of fun playing on PC, I'd say.
Yeah, still a blast. And I think this is like what I hope will persist throughout the release of these games is the specific kind of time frame and design philosophies and principles. Like the popular design principles at the time were not as they are right now, where especially multiplayer, where it's constant renewal, constant meta changes, constant feedback, and all that jazz. You kind of just get in there, play the game. And it's rock solid mechanics, and it felt good. It just felt like an arena shooter with great support, like for the modern gamer. And Halo CE, I mean, it's been on PC. It was the one I played the most of on PC way back when.
Yeah, same.
We installed it on we found a backdoor into our school network. Poor password protection, and save that exe on the network, and we could play it pretty easily from any computer in my high school. And so we had these
dream.
It was amazing. We had these really elaborate
was it the full game or was it the demo?
Full game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that and Max Payne, and I played Max Payne in the back of study hall. It's the first time I played Max Payne. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, it was it was the first Halo on PC. It was ported by Gearbox, correct? Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Gearbox Software, and that Crouch story has some interesting that you were mentioned earlier, has some interesting details about the port. But it also was a very different game inherently, and again, you talk about that in those features, and like this has been sort of the narrative of 343 in the process of bringing these games to PC. It's like inherently going to change and like bump up against the console oriented design of these things. And I remember in Halo CE, like the pistol being the thing, and influencing the kind of games you played.
And it certainly was the thing on Xbox as well.
Absolutely.
But just the difference in accuracy you have with a mouse with a weapon that can kill in 3 shots, I think,
super powerful.
Is like, you barely needed to be able to see somebody with a pistol on the PC to still get 3 headshots. Just see like a blob of color across the map, and you're like, I can probably kill them.
Yeah, Blood Gulch suddenly feels very small if pistols are in play. And I don't know, like I'm forgetting the name of the map, but it kind of like, because I would play on console too with my friends, right? And those matches I feel like were way more chaotic and just kind of the sandbox. Like they tended towards the sandbox chaos design intended by Bungie. But on PC, there was a lot more. We tended toward the more peekaboo style of matches. There was plenty of that Halo vibe and chaos inherent, like no matter what. But gosh, what's the name? There's like basically 2 tall walls facing each other with multiple levels.
The ship one, right?
The ship one. I'm forgetting what it's named, but that was like perfect pistols match, like or map. Because it's almost like a whack-a-mole. You have these like characters running across the way from each other, and like you're just kind of
boarding action.
There it is. And with pistols in play, it became like that whack-a-mole game where you're just like, okay, I need to, in order to see other players, I need to expose myself, but they might be watching out for me. So this really fun peekaboo style play. And like I said, Blood Gulch, it felt infinitely smaller. You kind of had to like ban pistols if you wanted to really get into the more traditional Halo play. How did you end up playing on PC? Did you play on PC back when?
Yeah, I did. So like you, I did play it a little bit in high school.
Yeah.
Some enterprising senior a few years ahead of me had installed the demo of the game on all of the PCs in our like 3D modeling drafting class. And so
Lovely.
towards the end of class, usually like the last 5-10 minutes, the teacher would sometimes let us just all hop in Halo and do a
Damn.
big LAN. But
Cool
that was like
teacher.
you only got Blood Gulch. That was the
all you
only
need.
map in the demo. It was all we needed. Yeah. So I played that a lot. My PC at the time wasn't good enough to run the game,
Mhm.
but a friend of mine got a sweet gaming PC the summer of like 2004, I think.
2 gigs RAM.
2005, something like that. And we played this game all summer we played Halo 1, just taking turns.
Yeah.
And that was, we would go into big 16-player matches online because it had a server browser,
Okay.
and there'd be a lot of servers running custom maps, modded maps, or just the regular maps, and we would play in like CTF matches that would go on for 3 hours. Which really does, like, going back to what you were saying earlier, capture like the moment in time that game came out, where one, nobody today wants to play matches that last that long, or very few people do, right? But also just the reasons those matches would go for so long are mechanics that no modern shooter has. Like, when you pick up the flag, you could still drive a vehicle, you could still fire your weapon in Halo 1. So the being the flag carrier had a really different connotation, and it had touch return. So you could spend 20 minutes sneaking your way across the map with the enemy team's flag, and then there could just be a guy at your base who just wandered over there to try to steal your flag and sees you and kills you, and then just touches it and immediately resets all that work you've done. Whereas most like modern games, if you're playing CTF, you have to, at least in modern Halo, like you have to sit on the flag for 10 seconds to return it, that kind of thing. It gives teams like a little push-pull opportunity, a thing to have a showdown over. And then old Halo is just like, nope, just walk on it, and 20 minutes gone, progress gone.
Yeah. A lot more emotional, like whiplash in old Halo.
For sure.
Endurance tests and
The insane physics of the warthog, like accidentally running over your own teammates, or like jumping out of the vehicle and somehow it clips you and kills you. You commit suicide
hits
by
a tiny
warthog.
boulder and goes sailing through the sky or whatever.
Yeah.
Warthog. Multiplayer is going to be a lot of fun.
I have a feeling, like Reach, I think this one, maybe more people will play it a little bit, but I think it will be kind of a novelty game. It's like, oh, if I feel like some real classic Halo, I'm gonna go back and like play around. It's not gonna be a game that people are just their daily shooter that they play.
It's gonna be a great Discord game. Like, hey Discord friends, how about some Halo? Let's hop in. I don't think you're ever gonna see the server population just popping off nonstop. I think Halo 3 is gonna be the one that gets a bigger
I think Halo 2 is gonna
Yeah.
really, it will have a consistent group of people more so than Reach who stick around and play.
Definitely.
But yeah, I'm with you that Halo 3 is gonna be the peak of it for sure.
We're getting to the good shit. Halo 1 is especially, I think for me, the campaign is what I love. The multiplayer, but the campaign has quite a bit of staying power, and I think it's still pretty darn good, and something I'm like, because of the distance between it and me, and like Reach not being this like Master Chief like central to the primary narrative. Well, it's very important, but it's not Chief and Cortana driven. I think this is it's going to be a fun one to dive back into, and I remember a lot of like late nights sleepovers with buds, just like playing on Legendary, just having the patience of a saint. Some reason that like I just don't have anymore for games.
Legendary
But
in that first game is hard. Yeah.
very, very difficult. It's like progress is made 1 inch at a time, checkpoint by checkpoint. But it's fun, and I think on PC it might be a bit easier because of that beautiful mouse aim.
Yeah, I think that campaign it shows its age, but it's still the things that it does well
Yeah.
are still really engaging. Like just the really large levels that you can kind of explore. They're not super open ended. A couple of them are, but like you're still kind of progressing from one big area to the next. But they really, especially for games at the time, I feel like they let you approach those encounters like in a really freeform way that was super cool, that a lot of shooters still don't do today. So even if it's not the prettiest, and even if some of the things like the weird physics with the warthog, and like the simplicity of the groups of enemies you're
Yeah.
interacting with, right? Like they don't have a lot of scripting going on with what the enemies, the enemies suddenly showing up in some interesting configuration, blah blah. Like pretty simple environments. Like there's a group of enemies over there, go fight them. But just the freedom to steal a banshee and go attack the enemy that way, or try to sneak up on them a little bit, or use whichever weapons that you find on the ground. Like it still does that stuff really well, and it just has such a good sci-fi vibe before
Yeah.
they kind of before they inevitably said too much in this universe, like when it was all still
Yeah.
mysterious. Like it has that sense of mystery that's really good.
Got pretty out there. Yeah, Halo hits different. It just hits different than a lot of shooters, and I think like I don't even really give a shit about the stories too much. It's just the feeling of that universe, and the music in combination with just some of the shit these characters say, and the set pieces is what really sticks with me. I mean, God, I watched after Reach came out, I kind of I was like, well, I don't know if I'll ever play Halo 5. Who knows if that's ever going to come to PC. So I watched like a lore catch-up video, and my fucking eyes were rolling in the back of my head. Like so hard. Oh my God. I thought it got bad and convoluted in like 2 and 3, but oh my God. What?
It's If you think about it, it's sort of I don't know, like their curse almost was, for the first Halo, they came up with the concept of the Halo, which just as a sci-fi idea
Pretty
is
cool.
so fucking cool. Like just the design of this mechanical ring with environment, atmosphere on the inside of it is like, it's like the Dyson sphere, but even more inventive, like even cooler as a setting that was so good. And then you find out it's a super weapon, and like the reason it was built and all this stuff, it gives you just enough to just really like latch on to this world they've created without needing to explain much to you. And then over the next 20 years, they inevitably like explain way too many things and add too many characters from the past who created whatever. And just like at that point you have to really be invested to give a shit about it, whereas like I kind of just want like the really cool sci-fi premise and like a couple good characters, and leave it at that.
Give me some timpani and some horns, and just let me bounce around on a planet and shoot stuff.
Give me some monks.
Yeah.
Some chanting monks. That's all I need.
Hell yeah. And yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. We'll wrap here shortly, but I'm so pleased by this staggered release format in chronological order, because, Infinite on the horizon, Halo Infinite is it a 2020 date?
It's out the end of this year. It'll launch with the new Xbox.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's going to be a flagship title. It's been cool to like, a couple months between each, kind of slowly revisit this series on a beautiful PC with mouse keyboard controls, like the way I prefer to play now. And like all of my friends friends from the past, like congregating around it, coming out of the woodwork, to just kind of like say hello and poke our collective heads in for a while and just relive it together. So, and they're doing a great job. 343 is doing from what I've seen and played, like it all works pretty darn well, and smooth package, much better than the initial Xbox launch. By a
Yeah,
long
for
shot.
sure. Like there have been some problems here and
Yeah,
there that some
yeah.
people take. Some people were really upset with the audio quality in Reach, which like it didn't sound great. It definitely had some real muffled bits. And I talked to them about that, and they talked about, okay, yeah, the problem with it was when you take the way like the audio was encoded basically for the Xbox 360, adapting that for the PC, like didn't end up sounding very good. But the process of fixing that is like quite detailed, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes a long time. They have to go back to all the source stuff, like bring in an engineer to like entirely like remix everything and apply it to, bring it into this package and make sure that it integrates properly with modern hardware that
Mm-hmm.
now outputs Dolby 7.1 and stereo for your headphones and all that stuff. So like it literally takes months to fix
It's a lot
something
of
like
work.
that, and at least to do it right. So they're working on that, and like the crouching was a thing in Reach where you actually couldn't crouch while moving with
Mm-hmm.
WASD, because in the original game you can only crouch while you're like walking very slowly. You can't crouch from a run.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no way to walk slowly with WASD. It's like all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
So they had to bring in a fix for that. So there's some things here and there, and like I really want them to support mods for
Yeah.
Halo 1.
It's a big
And
thing.
current like they're on board for that, but it's kind of a like we need to get all these games out first kind of thing.
Fair enough.
So what they're doing right now is like we're not stopping people from making mods. People can make mods for sure. You can launch a version of the game that doesn't have like the anti-cheat on, so you
Mm-hmm.
can't go into matchmaking with it, but otherwise like you can mod to your heart's content. Hopefully at some point they might even support Steam Workshop. They're interested in like having a server browser,
Ooh.
but those are kind of all like future goals once they get all the games up and running on PC. So
Yeah.
they have work to do for the next year to 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
but that's I can wait. I can wait for that stuff.
For sure.
I'd rather just be able to play the game and have it be stable, and then let them slowly add that stuff on when it's ready.
Yeah. Did we get word, or did they talk to you about sort of? It's probably too early, but Halo 2 window, like where they're at with that.
They didn't give me a window, but they did tell me that this was in February, a few weeks ago. They did say all of the games are currently running on PC.
Okay. Cool.
So they all work on PC right now, but obviously working and being done and ready to release to, 1 million people is pretty different.
Sure.
But I have a feeling it's going to be like a 3-month cadence, because it was 3 months from Reach to Halo 1. It might even be a little bit faster now that they are working on games that, Reach had never been on Xbox One before either. So
Yeah.
that was like a big port for that side as well. So, hey, maybe 2 months.
Cool.
Maybe 2 months for the next one.
Well, you can bet that it's after the reception of Reach and how many people were playing it that I think this is not a small project to them at all.
Yeah.
So exciting times. Took a while, but here we are. Cool. But I think unless you have anything else to say about Halo, Wes, we can wrap and say goodbye for the week.
Totally.
Cool. Yeah, that's gonna do it for here. I'll probably throw some audio from one of our interviews from PAX onto the end of this. So I don't know which one. I'm gonna surprise myself.
Bonus.
Yeah, bonus content. But I can't close out the show, well, I guess without telling you where to listen. Go to pcgamer.com/tag/podcast to find our archive of shows, youtube.com/pcgamer, anchor.m/pcgamer. You can go to Spotify, search for The PC Gamer Show, iTunes, The PC Gamer Show. RSS feed is at that first link, pcgamer.com/tag/podcast. Follow Wes at Wesley_Fenlon.
No underscore.
No underscore.
Just name.
I'm doing Twitter again. Pulled me back in at my_beards. Yeah, and so until next week, and oh gosh, it's speeding up. Games are coming out. They're gonna be hitting nonstop from here on. But until next week, don't forget to what?
Game on.
Thank you, Wes.
I'm here for you, James.